Every day, approximately 20% of all the world's oil passes through a narrow stretch of water between Iran and Oman, known as the Strait of Hormuz. At one point, President Trump even questioned the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff about why this passage couldn't simply be reopened immediately. After all, several countries depend directly on this route and expect the United States to guarantee its operation. At its narrowest point, this essential route for the flow of global energy reduces to a corridor about 34 kilometers wide. But before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. In practice, however, shipping routes are even more limited. There are channels of only approximately 3.2 kilometers in each direction. Even so, tens of millions of barrels of oil pass through this reduced space daily. And this leads to an inevitable conclusion. If the Strait of Hormuz is blocked, the effects will almost instantly impact the entire global economy. Lately, increased tensions in the region have highlighted just how vulnerable this strategic point is. Warships remain on constant patrol. Insurance costs for oil tankers are skyrocketing. Shipping companies are discreetly developing alternative plans. Over the past few years, the strait has been the scene of vessel seizures, damaged ships, and even direct military confrontations. This is one of the few places in the world where a simple miscalculation can quickly escalate into a large-scale conflict. Officially, the passage remains open. However, the mere possibility of an interruption is enough to cause instability in global energy markets. And this nervousness goes far beyond financial negotiations. A strike there would represent more than just a geopolitical crisis. It would mean more expensive fuel, increased logistics costs, and higher prices on supermarket shelves, with impacts felt from New York to Tokyo. This raises an intriguing question. What if ships no longer needed to cross the Strait of Hormuz? For decades, engineers and strategists have been analyzing a bold proposal: the construction of a gigantic canal through the mountains of the Musandam Peninsula in Oman, allowing vessels to completely bypass the strait. On paper, it sounds like the perfect solution. But reality has a habit of making simple ideas much more complicated. To understand the canal's proposal, one must first understand the geography. The Persian Gulf is home to some of the world's largest oil producers: Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, United Arab Emirates. Virtually every oil tanker leaving these countries must pass through a single exit: the Strait of Hormuz. Approximately 20 million barrels of oil pass through this corridor every day. This represents roughly 1/5 of global oil consumption. Few places on Earth possess this level of economic importance, and, unlike many other trade routes, there are very few alternatives. Some countries have tried to reduce their dependence on the strait. Saudi Arabia has built pipelines that transport oil across the Arabian Peninsula to ports on the Red Sea. The United Arab Emirates built an oil pipeline connecting its oil fields directly to the port of Fujairah, outside the Strait of Hormuz. But even combined, these pipelines can only transport a fraction of the oil that normally travels by ship. For the rest of the world's energy supply, ships remain essential. This means that the global economy still depends on this narrow corridor. And this dependence makes engineers extremely uncomfortable because choke points concentrate risks. And few choke points on the planet are as sensitive as this one. Now look at the map again. In the far north of Oman, there is a mountainous region called the Musandam Peninsula. It juts out over the Strait of Hormuz like an irregular natural fortress. But here's the interesting part. At several points, the distance between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman is surprisingly short. Only a few dozen kilometers of land separate these two bodies of water, which raises an obvious idea. Why not dig a canal directly through the peninsula? Ships leaving the Persian Gulf could completely bypass the Strait of Hormuz. Instead of navigating a narrow geopolitical choke point, Oil tankers could head straight for the open ocean. A brilliant idea. On paper. Musandam Peninsula is not a flat desert. It is part of the Hajar Mountains, one of the most rugged landscapes in the Middle East. Steep limestone peaks rise dramatically from the coast. Some mountains there exceed 2,000 meters in altitude. Building a canal there wouldn't just mean digging up sand. It would mean cutting through entire mountains, and the canal would need to be gigantic. Modern oil tankers, known as VLCCs, very low-load combusting carriers. Large crude carriers are among the largest ships ever built. To safely accommodate them, a canal would need to be deep, wide, and stable enough for vessels hundreds of meters long. The necessary excavation would be colossal. Millions and millions of tons of rock would have to be blasted, cut, and removed. Entire mountain ranges would need to be reshaped. The environmental impact alone would be enormous, and the cost? Possibly hundreds of billions of dollars. To put that in perspective, even the massive expansion of the Panama Canal cost around $5 billion. A Musandam Canal could surpass that many times over, but engineering is only half the challenge. Even if the technical obstacles could be overcome, another problem would immediately arise: politics. Musandam Peninsula belongs to Oman, and to this day, there is no official plan to build a canal there. Oman's development strategy for the region is focused on tourism, ports, and regional infrastructure, not on opening a maritime corridor through its mountains. A project of this magnitude would require extraordinary international cooperation. Regional governments would need to support it. Investors would have to finance it, and long-term security guarantees would be needed to protect it. Because there's another uncomfortable truth. A channel wouldn't eliminate the vulnerability. It would simply shift the bottleneck to another location. Instead of the Strait of Hormuz, global oil flows would depend on a single artificial channel, and, like any channel, it could still be blocked. A ship that runs aground, a targeted attack, or even a natural disaster. Any one of these events could disrupt the route overnight. The global economy would simply be trading one bottleneck for another. So, if the Musandam Canal is so difficult to build, why does this idea keep coming back? Because it reveals something deeper about how the modern world works. Global trade depends on geography. A narrow canal in Egypt, a strait between rival nations, a small number of maritime corridors that silently keep the global economy moving. For centuries, these natural choke points have shaped the flow of energy, goods, and power around the planet. Musandam Canal represents a dream, a way to redesign geography itself, to remove one of the world's most fragile bottlenecks. But reality is stubborn. Mountains are hard to move. Politics is even harder. For now, the Strait of Hormuz remains exactly as it always has been, one of the most important and most vulnerable energy corridors on the planet. And as long as the world depends on it, the idea of a canal through Musandam will continue to capture the imagination of engineers, strategists, and all who wonder how fragile our global trading system really is.